He set his phone down so it wouldn't get wet. That one small decision is now at the center of a grand jury investigation, a joint forensic examination, and a family's search for answers. This is the story of the phone that came home when Nolan Wells did not. We know more tonight about the boat that carried Nolan Wells and his friends out to Horn Island, off the coast of Mississippi on the 4th of July, a trip that became the last one Nolan would ever take. Before he walked into the water to swim, Nolan Wells did something completely ordinary. He set his phone down. According to his friend Traciston Shepard, speaking to People magazine, Nolan left his phone behind on the boat while he swam, for the most teenage reason imaginable. He didn't want it to get wet. Millions of kids have made that exact same choice on a summer holiday. But on this boat, off this island, that one ordinary decision turned a piece of glass and metal into what may be the single most important object in an entire investigation into how an 18-year-old lost his life. Because that phone came home, Nolan did not. What his family says they found on it, or more precisely what they say they did not find on it, is now heading toward a joint forensic examination, a grand jury, and quite possibly the servers of Snapchat itself. This video is about that phone, where it traveled, hour by hour, what the family discovered when they opened it, what they believe may have been deleted, and what can actually be recovered, according to a retired FBI agent who has spoken publicly about this exact case. It also covers a detail that has drawn far less attention than it deserves: why both sides, the family and the district attorney, have now agreed to examine this device together. As always, every claim in this video is sourced. This account draws on reporting from People, NewsNation, Good Morning America, and WLBT. Wherever something is a family suspicion rather than an established fact, it will be labeled exactly that way, using language like "according to the family," "it has been suggested," or "authorities have not confirmed," because that distinction matters more in this video than in any other we've made on this case. One more piece of framing before we begin, because it explains why this angle deserves its own video. Modern death investigations increasingly turn on phones more than almost anything else. Not because devices are magic, but because a phone is the one witness that follows its owner through an entire day. It registers when its user was active and when that activity stopped. It logs what was typed, what was opened, what was captured. Investigators will tell you that, case after case, the story a device preserves has confirmed people's accounts, contradicted them, and cleared them. So when a case comes down to a handful of people with conflicting memories and one recovered phone, that phone isn't a side detail. It's the referee. Think about how rarely that's true of anything else in an investigation like this one. Witnesses forget details, or remember them differently, or simply weren't looking at the right moment. A barrier island 10 miles from shore doesn't preserve footprints the way a controlled scene might, and open water erases a scene faster than almost any other environment investigators deal with. A phone doesn't share those limitations. It doesn't get nervous under questioning. It doesn't reshape a memory to make sense of a chaotic afternoon after the fact. It simply records, mechanically and without judgment, whatever its sensors and software were built to capture. That is what makes this particular device worth an entire video of its own. Start with the geography because it's stranger than it first appears. It's the 4th of July. Horn Island sits roughly 10 miles off the Mississippi coast, a remote barrier island reachable only by boat. Nolan, 18, is there with friends for a holiday outing. At some point he goes swimming, and according to Shepard's account, the phone stays behind on the boat. Now line that up against the timeline established through public records. Nolan is last seen around 3 p.m. About an hour later, at roughly 4 p.m., the boat's operator radios a private towing company, reporting that the vessel is taking on water. At 4:31 p.m., according to GPS records from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the boat departs Horn Island. It gets towed, recovers, and heads back toward the mainland. By evening, it has returned to its dock, been pulled from the water entirely, and transported overland to a residence in Biloxi. If Shepard's account holds up, that means Nolan's phone made the entire journey, off the island, across the water, onto a trailer, all the way to the mainland, while Nolan himself was still out there. Two objects that started the day together ended it in completely different places. That gap between where the phone went and where Nolan stayed is the very shape of this mystery. There's something almost disorienting about laying that timeline out in plain language. A phone doesn't make choices. It doesn't decide to leave an island or stay behind. It simply goes wherever the hands holding it go, and on this particular afternoon, those hands weren't Nolan's. Every stage of that boat's mechanical trouble, the water coming in, the call to the towing company, the tow itself, the slow crawl back toward the mainland, happened with Nolan's phone somewhere on board, silently logging whatever a phone logs, while the person it belonged to was somewhere investigators would spend the next several weeks trying to pin down. Here is where the family enters the story, and honestly, this is the detail that's hardest to move past. According to reporting from People, Nolan's parents, Christine and Elmore Wansley, located the phone themselves. Using a tracking app, and with help from a friend back on the mainland, they followed the signal to their son's device. Sit with what that actually means. In what must have been among the most frightening hours of their lives, their child missing, no answers yet, this family was doing digital detective work that would eventually become one of the most contested pieces of evidence in the entire case. Christine has described the moment the dot on her screen told her the phone wasn't with Nolan. The phone was in one place, her son was somewhere else, and the distance between those 2 points is, in a very real sense, the entire mystery this investigation is trying to close. Most parents have used a tracking app for something ordinary, checking that a teenager made it home, confirming a delivery driver is close, finding a misplaced device in the couch cushions. Almost none of them have used it the way Christine and Elmore Wansley did on the night of July 4th, watching a single moving dot as the only available thread connecting them to their son, not knowing yet that the dot itself would eventually lead somewhere other than to him. That's the layer of this story that easy timelines and GPS logs can't fully capture. Behind every data point in this investigation is a family living through the worst night of their lives while also, without realizing it, building part of the evidentiary record. It's worth pausing on how that kind of tracking actually works, because the search itself becomes evidence. Apps that locate a phone rely on the device checking in through cellular signal, through Wi-Fi, through its own location service. Every check-in leaves a time-stamped breadcrumb. That means the family's search didn't just locate an object. It potentially documented where that object was at specific moments, in a way that can be pulled directly into the official record. Investigators tend to value this kind of data highly, for one simple reason. It was created innocently in real time by people who had no idea it would ever matter to a case. Evidence generated before anyone knew there would be an investigation is often the hardest evidence to dispute. So the family recovered the phone. Then they opened it. Christine went through her son's accounts, and according to the family's public statements, what she found was silence. No saved pictures from July 4th. No videos from the boat. No snaps from the island. Nothing documenting what should have been one of the biggest holiday weekends of the summer. On its own, an empty gallery is just an empty gallery. But context shapes how that emptiness reads, and here is the context the family has provided. Nolan, they say, used Snapchat constantly. He documented gatherings. He filmed things. Christine told Good Morning America that she suspects messages from July 4th were deleted, precisely because her son used the app so heavily. And yet, from that day, there was nothing. NewsNation reported the family's belief directly. They think messages from the day he went missing may have been deleted. There's a second layer here too, one that received far less attention than it probably deserved. Christine also told Good Morning America that the phone's location history appeared to conflict with what some of Nolan's friends had described seeing through Snapchat. Sit with that sentence for a moment. The family is saying that the device's own memory of where the phone traveled does not line up cleanly with the human accounts of that day. The specifics haven't been made public. We don't know which locations, at which times, conflict with which statements. But the claim itself explains why this device sits at the center of gravity in this investigation. It isn't only about what might be missing from the phone. It's about whether what remains on it contradicts what people have said happened. Now, in keeping with the promise made at the top of this video, honesty about the line between suspicion and fact, here is that line drawn as clearly as possible with both sides given their due. The family's suspicion of deletion is exactly that, a suspicion. It has not been confirmed by investigators, not publicly, and there is a genuinely innocent explanation available, one that anyone familiar with Snapchat already understands. Deletion is what the app does by design. Ordinary snaps and messages disappear automatically after they're viewed, unless someone actively chooses to save them. So an empty Snapchat history from July 4th could mean someone erased evidence. Or it could mean an 18-year-old sent snaps that vanished exactly the way the platform intends, because saving was never really the point of the app in the first place. Both explanations fit the same empty screen. And that is precisely why this matters. An empty screen is not proof of innocence, and it is not proof of wrongdoing. It's a question. It cannot be settled by speculation, not mine, not yours, not anyone's watching this video. It can only be settled by forensics, conducted properly, by people qualified to do it. So let's talk about what forensic examination can actually do here, because this is where the case has a real, concrete reason for cautious hope. NewsNation's Brian Enton spoke with retired FBI agent Kieran Ramsey about this exact question, and Ramsey's answer is worth sitting with. He said investigators may be able to recover, in his words, several layers of data from Nolan's Snapchat account, even if information was deleted. Several layers. Here's what that means in plain terms. When something is deleted from a phone, it is often not actually gone, it's dereferenced. The pointer to the file is removed, but traces can remain in the device's storage until they're overwritten by new data. A proper forensic extraction doesn't browse a phone the way a user does. It images the entire storage and digs through what an ordinary person can never see. System artifacts, activity logs, fragments left in unallocated storage, and sometimes records of what was created, and what was removed, and precisely when. That last part is the whole ballgame, because to a grieving parent scrolling through an app, an ordinary vanish snap and a deliberate deletion can look identical. To a trained examiner working with the right tools, they can look very different. Timing is everything. If content was removed, the central question becomes, when? Before Nolan went missing? After? By whom? From which device? Logged in from where? Run the possibilities forward. Deletion that happened days earlier would mean very little. Deletion timestamped to the evening of July 4th, or to the days immediately afterward while a search was already underway, would mean a great deal, and investigators would want to know exactly whose hands the phone passed through during that window. Same empty screen, completely different stories. Only a proper extraction can say which one this is. This is also why a forensic examiner's job looks so different from a family member's job, even when they're staring at the exact same device. Christine went through her son's phone the way any parent would, opening apps, scrolling galleries, looking for the pictures her son would normally have taken. That's a completely reasonable human way to search a phone, and it's exactly how she found the absence that alarmed her. But it's not how a forensic examiner works. An examiner treats the phone as a storage system first and an app second, pulling raw data straight from the device rather than viewing it through Snapchat's own interface, which is designed to show users only what currently exists, not what once did. That difference in method is precisely why Ramsey's several layers comment carries real weight. It's not optimism. It's a description of how modern digital forensics actually functions. The phone itself is only half of the digital picture. Snapchat is a company, and companies keep servers. Law enforcement can, through legal process, request records directly from Snap, account activity, login history, message metadata, and, depending on settings and circumstances, even location-related data. In other words, even in a worst-case scenario where the device itself yields nothing further, there may be a second copy of July 4th sitting in a data center somewhere, waiting on a subpoena. There's a procedural detail worth knowing here too. When investigators anticipate needing records from a platform, they can send what's called a preservation request, a legal mechanism that freezes an account's data so it can't age out of a company's normal retention windows while paperwork moves through the system. We don't know publicly what requests, if any, have gone to Snap in this case. But given that the FBI has confirmed it is assisting Jackson County investigators specifically with digital evidence, it would be surprising if the platform side of this inquiry weren't already in motion. Content is one question. Metadata is another separate one. Who logged in, from where, on what device, at what time. Even in cases where the messages themselves prove unrecoverable, that skeleton of activity often survives, and skeletons talk. That is presumably part of what the FBI's assistance with digital evidence looks like here, though investigators have not detailed their exact methods publicly, and this video won't pretend otherwise. There's tension around this case that goes beyond data, and covering it honestly means not looking away from it. At a news conference, the Reverend Al Sharpton stood alongside Nolan's parents and raised a concern. His words, that race may have contributed to what happened, noting that Nolan was one black teenager on a trip with several white friends. That concern is on the record, voiced from the family's side of the podium, and reporting it accurately is part of covering this story honestly. What this video will not do is convert that concern into a conclusion. No one has been charged. The cause of Nolan's death remains undetermined. His friends have been interviewed at length by investigators, and both they and their families have reportedly received threats, which helps absolutely no one and honors no one's memory, including Nolan's. The only way through any of this, the only way that actually leads somewhere, is the evidence, which is exactly why the next development in this case matters so much. That development is the mutual inspection, and it's the reason this video exists. When the Wells family and their attorneys, Ben Crump and Eric Hertz, met with Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers-McElrath in Pascagoula on July 15. One of the concrete outcomes, reported by WLBT and confirmed across multiple outlets, was this. Experts working with the family and experts working with the district attorney's office will jointly examine Nolan's phone. Both sides, same device, same findings, delivered at the same time. It's worth understanding just how unusual and how genuinely smart that arrangement is. In contested cases, the fight over digital evidence usually plays out like this. Law enforcement takes possession of the device, the family waits in the dark, months pass, trust collapses, and every delay hardens into a new conspiracy theory. A mutual inspection short-circuits that entire pattern. Whatever this phone ultimately reveals, both sides will hear it together, at the same moment. If the examination uncovers deliberate deletion, the family won't need to fight through litigation just to make that finding public. And if the examination finds nothing suspicious at all, that conclusion will carry real weight, precisely because the family's own experts will have been in the room to confirm it, in a way no single press release from either side ever could. Either outcome arrives with built-in credibility. In a case already drowning in public distrust, that structural choice might be the single most constructive step anyone has taken since July 4th. It also quietly raises the stakes, because after a joint examination, neither side gets to claim afterward that the results were hidden, spun, or manufactured. Whatever this phone says next, everyone involved will have heard it firsthand, together. It's worth remembering how we got here. This wasn't the default path. It came out of a meeting in Pascagoula where a family that has publicly questioned whether their son's case is being handled with the same urgency as others sat down directly with the prosecutor overseeing that case. According to Crump, both sides described that meeting as honest and direct. A mutual inspection is the kind of outcome that only happens when both parties actually believe the other is negotiating in good faith. That doesn't erase the distrust that led to this point, and it doesn't answer any of the underlying questions about what happened to Nolan. But it does mean that, on the specific question of what this phone contains, both sides are choosing transparency over a prolonged standoff. In a case that has already generated national attention, threats against people connected to it, and a great deal of unverified speculation online, that choice mattered. There's one more place a phone appears in this story, and it may be the strangest one yet. A clip recorded on Snapchat by someone on the island that day went viral, appearing to capture an argument. In it, a voice can be heard demanding, "Give me my phone." For days, corners of the internet insisted that voice belonged to Nolan and built theories on top of that assumption. Then Trace's Tin Shepherd, the same friend who described Nolan leaving his phone behind on the boat, came forward and said the voice in that clip was his own, not Nolan's. Investigators have said they're reviewing photos and videos connected to the case and have asked anyone with original footage to submit it directly, rather than posting it online. Notice the pattern here. Even the viral piece of evidence in this story is, at its core, about a phone, whose phone, where it was, and who wanted it back. The clip itself remains disputed, and this video won't claim it proves anything, because no one has established that it does. But it's one more reason the real digital record, properly extracted, matters as much as it does. The internet's version of this day has already been wrong at least once. Step back and look at what's actually on the table. There are two machine witnesses in this case now. The boat's GPS tracker, which maps the vessel's movements to the minute throughout that entire afternoon, and, potentially, the phone's own location history, which the family says conflicts with the human accounts they've heard. If investigators lay those two datasets side by side, boat and phone, they can begin answering questions that no witness statement alone can settle. Where was the phone when the boat departed Horn Island at 4:31 p.m.? Where was it during the distress call to the towing company? When exactly did it stop moving? This is how the roughly 90-minute gap between Nolan's last confirmed sighting and the boat's departure could finally start to close, not through competing memories, but through machines corroborating or contradicting each other. So here is where the phone evidence actually stands, separated cleanly into what's confirmed and what isn't. Confirmed, the phone was recovered, and the family located it using a tracking app. Confirmed, the family found no saved content from July 4th. Confirmed, a joint forensic inspection has been agreed to between the family's experts and the district attorney's office. Confirmed, the FBI has assisted with digital evidence in this investigation. Family suspicion, not yet confirmed, that Snapchat messages from July 4th were deleted, and that the phone's location history conflicts with friends' accounts in some meaningful way. Unknown, what the extraction will ultimately find, and when the public will learn it. That short list is worth keeping in mind the next time a headline about this case promises a breakthrough. A handful of things are locked down and verifiable. A couple of things are a family's honest, understandable suspicion. And the single biggest question, what actually happened to Nolan on that island, still sits, for now, in the unknown column, waiting on forensics rather than speculation. So what should you actually be watching for? 3 signals. First, any announcement that the joint phone examination has begun or concluded, because once it's finished, results should follow. Second, the autopsy reports, both the official version and the independent one, since the cause of Nolan's death shapes how every piece of digital evidence gets interpreted going forward. Third, any mention of records arriving from Snap itself, because that's the moment the server-side story enters the case in a documented way. When any of those 3 developments break, ignore whatever the loudest headline claims, and ask one question instead: what was actually found, and who confirmed it? The investigation's findings are headed to a grand jury once the underlying work is complete, and the district attorney has called this case a priority. If you want the phone examination explained the moment results become public, subscribe now, because that update is not a maybe. It's coming. And when it lands, this channel will walk through exactly what was found and what it means, sources named, speculation excluded, the same way we've approached this story today. This story began with an ordinary decision. A young man sets his phone down so it won't get wet and walks into the water on the 4th of July. Everything this case has become since then: the tracking app search through the worst night of a family's life, the empty Snapchat history, the joint inspection, the grand jury waiting at the end of it all flows downstream from that one small moment on a boat. His family went looking for their son and found his phone instead. Now that phone is the thing everyone involved is waiting to hear speak. It's an unusual position for a piece of technology to occupy, outliving the moment it was meant to document, carried off an island it never chose to leave, and now sitting at the center of a legal process that will decide whether anyone is ever held accountable for what happened to Nolan. None of that was written into the phone's design. It was just a device meant to take pictures, send messages, and get its owner through an ordinary summer day. Instead, it became the last complete record of that day, and possibly the clearest one anyone will ever have. So here's a question worth sitting with, and this channel wants your reasoning, not just a verdict. Knowing how Snapchat actually works, and knowing what his parents have said about how often Nolan used it, which explanation do you find more plausible for that empty July 4th history? And what single piece of forensic evidence would be enough to change your mind? Leave your reasoning in the comments. This channel reads everyone, and on this particular case, some of the most careful thinking has come directly from viewers. There will be another update the moment something real happens. Until then, remember what sits behind every frame of this story: a family that had to track their own child's phone across open water, simply to bring a piece of him home. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old. He deserves the truth recovered layer by layer, if that's what it takes to get there. If you want to be notified the moment the joint forensic examination produces results, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. This case isn't over, and neither is our coverage of it. Sourced, balanced, and updated only when there's something real to report. Thank you for watching.